Have you ever been asked to write a list of learning objectives for a lesson or a course? Often, this happens after you have already created the training material, sometimes because of an external request. At that point, the process might seem likely useless. However, if done while designing a learning path, setting precise learning objectives can actually help structure effective activities. In this video, you are going to discover how to write effective learning objectives and how your training or teaching can benefit from doing it. In particular, I will give you 3 tips and tools that you can use to define precise learning objectives. But first, why should a trainer define learning objectives before a course? When you are preparing a new module or a class, it is very important knowing what minimum conditions your learners should reach in order for the module to be successful. Setting precise learning objectives helps you achieve this. It clarifies what your learners need to be able to know and do in order to say that they minimally profited from your training. In turn, this helps you understand what you need to assess at the end of the training and to define more logical and straightforward learning activities. It follows from this discussion that effective learning objectives specify clearly things or actions your learners should be able to do or to know at the end of a lesson or a course. Would you like to see an example? Here it is. By the end of this video, you will be able to write effective learning objectives that respect the SMART criteria. This is a good objective because it explains clearly and exhaustively what you should be able to do after watching this video. What are SMART criteria? Let's see it together. In order to be effective, learning objectives should respect the SMART acronym. This means that your objectives should always be specific. They must be clearly defined and specify what your learners should finally know or learn to do. Measurable. They must favor quantified measures to define more precisely what competencies your learner will achieve. Attainable. They should be feasible and realistic and consider the level of competencies of your learners and the resources available for your training. Relevant. They should be appropriate for the kind of problems you want your learners to be able to solve by the end of the training. Time-framed. They must include a deadline and specify when you will expect your learners to achieve them. Don't forget to refer to the SMART acronym when you write a learning objective to ensure that it is properly defined. A good suggestion to respect the SMART criterion is always to write learning objectives based on their proper logical structure. That is, a good learning objective should always include the following parameters: the time, the learner, the action, the content, and optionally a mean. Let's review them together. Time. We have already seen that learning objectives must be time-framed. That is, they must indicate a clear time limit by which they will be accomplished. Thus, in case, for example, of a course, this parameter should always be made explicit. The learning objectives should specify that the student will achieve some objectives by the end of the course. Learners. When you specify an objective, also consider who the learners responsible for attaining your training will be. This is important because it helps you focus on their entry capacities, therefore to shape the training prerequisites. Action, object, and optionally a further specification on one or more means. Well-defined objectives must identify a noticeable achievement that, when performed by the learner, will demonstrate that the objective has been completed or achieved. It is very important to specify these parameters at the level of behavior change, rather than cognitive achievements. What does that mean? Let's see an example. What does it mean that, by the end of a unit, your learners will be able to understand a concept? Will they be able to paraphrase it with their own words, or to list its components, or to explain it with reference to a more general theory or framework, or to provide an example where the concept is applied? Each of these verbs specifies what your learners will know after the training by identifying precise behavior that they must execute in order to manifest that particular knowledge. If your learning objectives do not refer to manifest behavior such as this, it will be very hard for you to assess by the end of the training if it has been successful or not. In order to help you identify manifest actions, even for cognitive achievements, I recommend you to use lists of cognitive taxonomies widely employed in structural design, such as Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchy of 6 cognitive achievements that a learner can reach while acquiring new knowledge or skills. They are: remember, the learner is able to recognize or to memorize information. Understand, the learner is able to reformulate a concept to explain it. Apply, the learner is able to use the information in a new situation. Analyze, the learner is able to decompose and define relationship among components and determine how these relate to one another and to a system. Evaluate, the learner is able to make a judgment or justify a decision according to criteria or standards. Create, the learner is able to put elements together in order to realize a new approach or product. The advantage of referring to Bloom's taxonomy is that it provides many good examples of verbs of perceivable behavior that you can use when designing learning objectives to specify cognitive achievements. In the place of remembering, for example, you can use verbs referring to manifest actions such as recognize, identify, match, list. Similarly, you can specify understand with verbs like define, explain, summarize, and describe. And so on for all the other levels in Bloom's taxonomy. You can find online a long list of verbs associated with each category of Bloom's taxonomy. I recommend you to have a look at them and start creating your own list in time. And there we are. In this video, you should have learned that defining learning objectives is important to shape effective success conditions for your trainings. Together, we have reviewed 3 tools to create effective learning objectives. First, check your learning objectives against the SMART criteria. Second, write your learning objectives keeping in mind their complete logical structure, which includes a time for completion, the learner, and an action, content, and possibly one or more means of achievement. And third, finally, resort to Bloom's taxonomy to translate cognitive achievements into observable behavior. If you want to make the best of this video, take a lesson of your own and try applying immediately this suggestion to it. You become more aware of what you want to achieve with your teaching or training and what you expect from your students. And if you liked this video, you will find more content on these and similar subjects in the Guidelines for Trainers, a handbook resulting from a European project that Europass Teacher Academy has developed together with other partners in order to foster the improvement of quality standards for international teaching and training. Don't miss the guidelines on the project's website.